All right, the next one up is going to be the push and pull for surfaces. So then we can start to create three-dimensional spaces and objects and overall three-dimensional modeling. So we just created these rectangles below that were the 20 footers, the 60 footers, and what I want to do next is hover over the very first one that we created, and I am going to hit P as a shortcut for push pull command here on SketchUp. And on the left you can sort of see the icon here. It has a little arrow above a surface, and so what I want to do is I have the ability to hover over this 2D surface we created, and when I see the dots or the texture appear, I know that SketchUp is telling me, is this the surface that you want to push or pull? And so by saying yes, I'm essentially going to click this surface once, and then I can drag this mouse above or below, right? So we're essentially either pulling or we're going to be pushing. That's essentially the whole command. Now, very similar to the way that we've been making these rectangles very accurate, I can type in a 20-foot height for this. And that just gave me a three-dimensional 20-foot height for this cube. So now we have a 20 by 20 by 20. And now what I could do here for the 40 by 40, I'm going to go ahead and type in P for the shortcut on the keyboard. And I'm going to hover over the surface. And what I can do here is, start pulling it and type in 40, or something that's pretty neat is once you have geometry in a three-dimensional space here in SketchUp, you can essentially hover over to the geometry that's sort of neighboring or what you want it to match. And this is where the endpoint snapping, the midpoint snapping, and the on-face snapping becomes really important. So it kind of makes it faster for you to move across. So right now, we should essentially have a 40 by 40 2D rectangle with a 20-foot height because we just matched the neighbor cube, which is 20 feet. Now let's say we wanted to do the full additional 20. I would just type in another 20 in the keyboard, and that just gave us a 40 by 40 by 40 cube. And if we wanted to do the same thing to the 60 and 10-inch cube, I would essentially say you could do, bam, just match it to that height. That would give us the 40-foot height that we're looking for. But if you wanted to make this an exact cube and all directions being equal, then I'm going to go ahead and click the P for shortcut on the command for the tool. And I'm going to click the surface once, and I'm going to type in 20 apostrophe for the feet, and then 10 for the inches, enter. And that just gave us a 60-foot, 10-inch cube that is the same height as its length and its width. I'm going to go back to a tool that we covered earlier on, which was the selection tool, when I talked about, hitting V, the shortcut in the keyboard for the cursor, the black cursor pointer. And if we click this once, it's going to select the surface. If we click this twice, it's going to select the surface and its corresponding line work. And then the third feature that I wanted to wait until we had some 3D massings and volumes going is if you do it 3 times, you're essentially selecting everything. Not only are you selecting the surface where you're originally clicking, you're also selecting all the surfaces associated with this cube and all the lines that come with it. So again, just a little quick recap. A single click with the selection tool is going to select the surface you clicked. A double click selects the line work and the surface you clicked. And if you do a triple click, we are selecting the overall object. Alright, so on the topic of, clicking and selecting everything, something that can be very helpful in your modeling process is the grouping command. And if you can sort of picture this as creating a safety zone for, this group that I'm about to make, I can, once it's selected, I can right click and hit make group. And what this essentially has done is now I have to double click in order to access the group and then be able to manipulate it as I see fit. Now, without the grouping, what would happen is, you're modeling and you're kind of going about your day and in your model, and anything can sort of affect another surface or a line that's not necessarily grouped. And so let's say, for example, I'm going to take this, make it a group, and just for our quick example here, I'm going to move an example there, and I'm going to right click this, and I'm just going to explode this group. So let's say I have the desire to make a model space in here, or sort of like a 3D space in here that will connect these two. And I want this to be sort of, midpoint, maybe there. And I think, maybe somebody wants to walk through here, and I'm going to go ahead and create an opening that is going to extend. It's sort of like a little tunnel. And then I'm going to go ahead and wipe that out. So now I have the ability to have these cubes that we created kind of connected. Now, but what's going to happen is, because I have an intersecting geometry that I just created here, now my surface of this cube is being affected by the mass that I created, and I am no longer able to select all of the surface without having to use the shift and then also adding that extra portion. Because SketchUp is a line and surface program like I covered before, and so anything that sort of subdivides a surface, SketchUp thinks that now that's a separate entity. And so if you don't want your model to be affected by other modeling things you have going on, the best recommendation here would be to group it. Let me try something here. Let's see, okay, there it is. What's happening is, before, if I wanted to just select this cube here, I could triple click. But now, because this piece is touching this piece and this piece is touching this piece, SketchUp assumes all of this is one entity. Okay, so not only is it going to subdivide the surfaces wherever there is a line, for example, drawn, and it's going to make assumptions that you want this to be separate from this and be separate from this, but now when I do a double click, I can only click as far as those subdivisions are, and if I do a triple click, it wants to group everything together, right? So I'm going to go back a few steps here, Control Z my way out of what I did. And what I'm going to do is triple click to make this a group. And now I'm going to go through the same process of creating a mass in between these two buildings here that I want to sort of maybe have a connection with each other. And I will extrude this about halfway. Where's the midpoint? There it is. And I'm going to create that sort of tunnel or passageway that I was saying, and there's the passageway. And now when I click on the group, it's just the cube 1, 2, 3. Now I'm inside of the group. You see how this sort of ghosted fencing appears? That's what I was saying, to imagine it's sort of like a safety net. And then I can escape or just simply click out of it, and then I'm back to these surfaces that are not grouped. But no matter what I do here, it's essentially not going to affect my actual cube, because that cube is sort of protected by being in a group. Okay, so this is where grouping and making sure that you know how to select things that you want to keep separate from everything else. It's going to be an efficient way to model, so you're not manipulating something that you have to revert the file to try to find your way back. Alright, so let's talk about the move and copy tool, which is going to be kind of interrelated. In the palette and the tool palette, go ahead and click the cross sort of arrow that has up, down, left, right. That is our move tool. And if you wanted a shortcut there, it's just M for moving. So let's say, there you go. The reason why these are sort of interrelated is because, let's say I'm selecting this cube here, and I'm going to hit M for move. And if you are on a PC, you're going to hit Alt, and if you are on a Mac, you're going to hit Option. And what this is going to do is, you see how my cursor just turned into a plus? I am going to now do from origin, move this over, and it just duplicated this cube. Let's say if I wanted to move it, I would simply just do M, select the origin point of moving, and then move it over. So again, if I do M with Alt or Option selected, that's essentially creating a duplicate of what I have selected. And if I select just the M command without any additional Alt or Option, I just move the original object. Now, when we're moving, there's something really important if you want to keep true to these axes that we covered in the earlier part of the tutorial. And what I mean by that is, right now, if I wanted to move this in the green or Y axis, something I could do is hit M for the shortcut on the keyboard, click the corner from which I'm going to move in, and then I would click left, the keyboard to your left, right? The left arrow keyboard, and that is going to lock my movement into the green Y axis. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit escape to get out of that. Let's say I wanted to lock it in the X direction, the red. I would click the origin or point that I want to move, and then I'm going to click the right. The right arrow key now creates a sort of dotted dash line here that is telling me, hey, you're locked into the X axis of movement. So again, this is similar to maybe an ortho command if you're familiar with AutoCAD, for those of you who have tried that. But essentially you're locking yourself in to always be in line with the axis, right? So again, clicking the point of origin, and let's say I want to go the Y axis, I'm going to hit the left arrow key on my keyboard, and that is locking this axis. And if I want to go right, I'm going to click the origin of movement and click the right arrow, and then go ahead and do that way. Now let me hit escape. And for us that want to move, let's say up and down, I'm going to click the point of origin and I'm going to hit the up arrow key, and now that is going to do the same function, but now we're just locked into our Z axis. So give that a shot and hope it is helpful and efficient for your modeling techniques. On the topic of movement and things like that, let's talk about rotation. Object rotation can be a little tricky if you haven't done it before, and so let's just cover it because it's going to be really helpful when you're doing your own modeling. Right now I have the move tool activated, and you can sort of see that when I hover over the surface of the object, there's these 4 red crosses that appear. And what SketchUp is essentially doing is asking me, do you want to rotate this object? Which is pretty cool that I don't have to be in the rotate function to try to rotate the object. So all I would have to do here is hover over that red cross, click once, and then go into the direction that I want to rotate to, and then click that second time, and it just rotated that cube. I know it's a little bit hard to see because we're kind of working in cubes, but let's see if I can just help clarify this a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this, and I'm going to go ahead and click into the group to just edit this. And I'm just going to make it a little bit different so we're able to follow the different kind of rotations that we have going on here. So let's say I'm going to carry this geometry out, and we're going to do it here. And now this is going to go this way. And so now we have, kind of like a step down Z sort of shape here. And what I want to do is rotate this. So this face is going to be at the very top of the Z axis. And so the actual shortcut for rotation tool is going to be R. I'm sorry, that's for the rectangle. It's going to be Q. It's one of those that doesn't really correspond to the alphabet, so it's a little bit random. But okay, when I want to rotate something, then it's going to show this sort of like protractor for those of us who remember some hand drawing. And it's going to ask you what face do you want to rotate on. And because I said I want this face to be in the Z direction, I'm essentially going to be rotating from this face, from this sort of facade of the geometry. I'm going to go back to Q for rotating, and I'm going to make sure that that is the face that's activated. And now when we're rotating, you kind of have to think about it this way. Where you're going to click the first time is going to be the origin of rotation, right? That's going to be your pivot point. And then you're gonna give SketchUp a sort of handle for that pivot point, almost like a wrench. So this is kind of the point of pivot, and now we're gonna create a handle, sort of like a wrench, for SketchUp to be able to grab that handle and rotate towards the direction we want to go. So I just click the center point, which is the pivot. Now I'm gonna click outside of that and make sure that it's on the axis that it's currently, facing, and that's the handle. That's the grip handle I want. I'm gonna click, and then the third click I'm gonna do is gonna be where I want it to be, right? Where do I want to end up? And that's the third click. So again, it's sort of like a 3-part process, but once you sort of practice and get in the swing of things, I think it'll be a little bit easy. We'll try one more time. Let's say I want to make sure that, let's see, this shape, which way do we want to rotate it? Let's make sure that this is now to our right. So what I'm going to do is Q for rotate, and I'm going to keep to this face. So I'm going to click the pivot point, and then I'm going to go up to just give, SketchUp that handle, if you will, for it to latch onto and grab. So while we rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. And so now I've done a rotation where this face is now to my right. Okay, so again, the rotate tool can be activated in 2 ways. You can be moving something, and then you have these red crosses appear on the surfaces, and you can simply hover, click, and rotate. Or you can do Q for the proper rotating, right, or the protractor kind of way, where you click the pivot point, you create a handle, and then you tell SketchUp rotate it in this direction. Something to be really mindful of when you're rotating is very similar to when we're moving things. You're kind of, the axes are lit up, so you're able to know in which direction you are rotating. So just be mindful of where you are in space and what axis is what color, so you're able to know in which direction you're rotating. So right now I'm going to click the pivot point, and my handle is being created on the blue or Z axis. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to be rotating this on the x-axis, the red axis, right? So when you're rotating, when you're moving, it's super important to know what plane you're on, so you're able to understand the axis of rotation. Okay?